Hello, everyone. I am Ann Lezak. I'm chair of the Vermont Democratic Party. I have a long history with the party. I was a former county chair and a campaign manager for my husband, and have long been involved. And I am just delighted to be here as we launch this session and a really very exciting campaign season ahead. I want to just give a couple quick thanks to Kate Olney and Asha Carroll of the who are staff of the party who put this all together, and to super volunteer Bob Farnham, who's doing the behind the scenes tech, for which we're ever grateful. I also want to give a shout out to you senators and representatives who are on the call on the Zoom, because you've already had a really long day, and I can see why you might want to not be here right now, but thank you so much for joining us. Your support is so important. I want to just tell you quickly how this will work. Once we hear from Speaker Korinsky and Senator Balint, we will then have Q&A. And what you can do is you can add your questions into the chat. We already have several that have been kind of preloaded. Folks have already asked some questions, and then our speakers will answer the questions after they present. I would be remiss if I didn't start by noting this historic day, January 6th, which none of us will ever forget, the date of the US Capitol insurrection. Along with you, I watched with horror as this violent attempt to overturn the election results unfolded live on TV. It was a very real threat to our democracy. And we now know that high elected officials from across the aisle were complicit. And in fact, they continue to spread misinformation that threatens to undermine our democracy. We must all ensure this never happens again. I am proud to introduce Speaker Jill Korinsky. I think I've known Jill since perhaps the third or fourth day when she arrived in Vermont as the fresh new VDP House campaign director. She proved herself very well there and became the VDP executive director, then a respected legislator from Chittenden County, all the while holding other leadership positions professionally. And now she has the highly deserved honor of being selected by her peers to be Speaker of the House. Jill, or Speaker Korinsky, has always been true to her values, incredibly hardworking, and has faced many tough challenges with skill and strong leadership. We are so lucky to have her leading the House. And among other challenges, including the unprecedented challenge of COVID, which we're, of course, still facing again. Speaker Krowinski, I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us about your key issues and priorities for this important session. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Ann, and thank you again for stepping up and serving as chair of our party. It is a tough job, but it is so important, and I know that you are already leading strongly and so well, and just really bringing people together to help us elect Democrats up and down the ticket. So thank you for all your great work. And I really have been reflecting a lot today, given that it is the anniversary of the insurrection, and thinking back about what it was like a year ago. And that day will forever be just, want to use the right word here, but I will always, always remember that feeling of being in the House chamber and hearing what was happening in Washington. I was actually with the pro tem, Senator Balint at the time. We were preparing in the chamber for our joint assembly. We had just been sworn in, and we were feeling so proud that we had a strong start. We had 3 women for the first time ever leading the House, the Senate, and the Lieutenant Governor's office all at the same time. And there was just this feeling of hope and coming together to get things done. And that moment when we found out what was happening, everything changed for us. And we knew that coming into these roles, we had challenges to tackle from the pandemic and how we can make sure we're taking care of everyone through it. And then added on this new dynamic and this new tension that was so hard. And I'll just never forget those following days of how we were all working together to ensure that we would not let something like that happen in Vermont. And we were going to work together to do the good work that the people needed us to do. And so today was a hard day. And I really appreciate the comments that you sent out, Anne. And I know the Pro Tem and I both made statements about it today. You know, we've come a long way, and the distinction from what's been happening in Washington, where it's just been gridlock. Well, we passed a historic voting rights bill that just really should be a model for the country. I'm really proud of that. So I just wanted to take a moment just to say that I can't believe it's been a year, and while we've made some progress on some really important issues like expanding voting rights across the state, we still have some really hard things to do. And so, you know, we made it through though, right? So last year we made some truly significant investments, and we're going to build off of that momentum, right? We're working to continue to build a recovery plan that leaves no Vermonter behind. So last session, and this is what we're going to build off of, we allocated $158 million into our economy, into workforce development and communities. We put $150 million into broadband investments, $120 into clean water investments, $54 million into climate action investments. We did historic work getting the our climate bill through, and now we have the climate action report coming, and we're going to be tackling and building and taking that work from the Global Warming Solutions Act. And then we had allocated money aside for us to really take the time to hear from Vermonters and understand what their needs are to help us get through this pandemic and to build back better. So we have $250 million aside for health and well-being, workforce development, and business supports. An additional $250 million for broadband development, $250 million for climate change mitigation, and $225 million for clean water initiatives. And now we are looking at really moving forward on tackling the complex and interconnected challenges between housing, childcare, and workforce. We are going to work on strategies to combat climate change and transition to a more sustainable way of life while preparing for shifting and severe weather patterns, which I think we've all been shocked at what we've been seeing in Washington with their latest snow dump and what last summer was like. We are going to address our unfunded pension liability in a way that's fair to teachers, state employees, and taxpayers. We have 2 constitutional amendments to pass in the House this year and to send to voters in November. We have Proposition 2, which is an amendment to the Vermont Constitution to remove slavery from it. And then we have Proposition 5, which is our Reproductive Freedom Amendment to enshrine reproductive rights for all Vermonters for what's to come. I can't stress enough how important this is right now, given the dynamic at the Supreme Court. We know that Roe v. Wade is hanging by a thread, and it's going to be up to us to ensure that we can do everything we can to protect those rights. And so this is one that is very personal and important to me. We have been working, Senator Balint and I, on reproductive rights for the last several years, and this is the final point for us, the final vote for us to get it to the voters in November. In addition, we are going to continue to protect public health and safety during this ongoing pandemic and use evidence-driven strategies and the advice of medical experts to make decisions. We're going to continue to dismantle systemic and institutional racism and advancing racial and social equity as an overarching goal in every policy area. And then we have so many other, it's a long list, I know, but we are in this. And there are many other important issues that we plan on taking up, including reapportionment, education, finance, and the waiting study, rural broadband rollout, increasing access to childcare, healthcare, mental health, substance use disorder treatment services, and more. I am so proud of all of the legislators that are here on this call who came into this session rolling up our sleeves and ready to get to work. And I just want to say I'm thankful to all of you for all of your work to help elect Democrats up and down the ballot. I see some potential candidates here tonight, which really makes me excited. We have a lot to be proud of. However, we have a lot of work to do this session, and we really need your help. I know we can do great things when we all work together. So thank you so much for having me here tonight, and I'll turn it back over to you, Ann.
Thank you very much, Jill. There is a lot on your plate, and it's all incredibly important. So yeah, we all need to be behind you and supporting this work. And we will hear about it throughout the session. So thanks so much for sharing with us. I'd now like to introduce Senate Pro Tem Becca Balint. Senator Balint is the first woman and first openly gay leader of the Vermont Senate. She's a longtime public school teacher who is widely recognized as an excellent communicator, coalition builder, and someone who gets things done, which really matters. As with Speaker Korinsky in the House, Senator Balint led the Senate in the first ever remote session, meaning overcoming all sorts of barriers to still be able to bring tremendous progress to Vermonters. And Senator Balint, I'm happy to hand it over to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ann. And like Jill said, thank you so much for being willing to step up and serve in that role. It's important for all of us to have a strong, steady leadership at the top of the party. And I also want to say, I don't know if there's ever been a pro tem and pro tem and Speaker of the House that have worked so closely together. And I think it's because we were majority leaders together, and we really understand our own chambers, but understand the struggles of the others' chamber. And I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to do this work with Jill through the pandemic. It's been very challenging. And if we were not working so closely and communicating so well, we would not be able to get as much done. And so just wanted to publicly thank her for that. And I also want to give a shout out to Bob Farnham, who is always here with us, making sure that we have the ability to record our events. So thanks to Bob, unsung hero of the party. So it's interesting always to go second, as Jill knows, when we tag team, because so many of the things that they're taking on in the House are similar things that we are looking at in the Senate. But I'll just try to put my own little spin on it and make sure we save time for questions. One of the things that I've been talking about a lot the past few months as I go out talking to Vermonters is to try to name some of the obvious things that are going on around us that may have become so normalized that we've become a little bit inured to it. And one of those things is that we are in the middle of a really terrible workforce crisis. And so businesses, nonprofits across the state are in fierce competition for workers as millions of Americans have quit their jobs. And I'm sure you've heard some people are calling it the Great Resignation. Some are calling it the Big Quit. It's not particular to Vermont, but when you have 30,000 fewer employees in the workforce in Vermont, that means a lot. You know, that is a rounding error for New York and New Jersey and Connecticut. For us, that's a lot of people. And so there are many reasons for this. And it's one of the reasons that I want to talk about it, because as a Gen Xer, I feel like I'm trying to navigate some tension between the millennials and the boomers, who seem to be pointing fingers at each other about the resignation that's happening right now. And I'm here to say there are many, many reasons for people leaving the workforce. And for folks who are 55 or older, many of them are reconsidering the careers that they've been in, and they're really looking for something else. For younger people who have been in retail or a forward-facing line of work like hospitality or the restaurant industry, this is a tough time to be in those fields when people are sometimes getting up in your face and perhaps being a little bit more aggressive than they ever used to be. So it's a time when people are really reflecting on what they want for their lives, what they want to do for their careers. And that is not a bad thing. So that's why I always want to name that. That's a good thing. We want workers to be empowered. We want people in the labor force to feel like they have options. And so the other great silver lining of this terrible pandemic is that we see workers getting higher wages. And that is a positive thing. And they're also able to negotiate more for benefits. So we're seeing this reimagining of the workforce. And as challenging as it is for every sector in Vermont, and I know it is, there are parts of this that give us an opportunity to think really more carefully about how we want to take care of the labor force. So I wanted to say that. The other thing that I wanted to name, which Jill also touched on, is that what we're hearing across the state is this incredible housing shortage that we're all facing. And Jill touched on the fact that we did a tour, but I want to talk a little bit more about it because it was really a unique experience that we put together. Jill and I, in collaboration with our chiefs of staff, and we brought in a consultant named Molly Loomis, who really has done a tremendous job in allowing us to travel virtually all over the state, talking to every corner of the state, towns and counties, and also small groups of Vermonters, people of color who identify as a BIPOC community in Burlington, or the BIPOC Vermonters in the southern part of the state, meeting with nurses and other healthcare industry workers, meeting with Indigenous Vermonters. And having those intentional conversations allowed us to communicate with 1,400 Vermonters over the last few months, which really gave us a ground view of what Vermonters are struggling with. And we heard a lot of stories of hope. We heard a lot of stories about people, how much they love their towns and their counties. And they felt like, although the pandemic has been horrible on so many fronts, people feel like it also brought communities together. And so they're really thinking about how might we be able to use these investment dollars to shore up those community ties, in addition to those big investments in housing and workforce. And so we're really hoping that this engagement process that we were able to create will be a way going forward that other electeds coming after us in these positions are going to be able to use to really get directly on the ground from Vermonters what's happening for them in real time. So as Jill said, we're going to be investing in housing and in workforce and shoring up childcare and really supporting our schools, many of which are in crisis right now. Our healthcare system also strained. The other day, had a press conference with the governor and Senator Sanders. The speaker was not able to be there, but she was absolutely standing with us in spirit, really investing more money and energy into our nursing crisis. So all of those things we have in common. We did the initial lift on the reproductive liberty bill, sent it over to the speaker, and the House is going to finish that work and send it out to voters. Super exciting to have Vermont really leading the nation on that. And, one thing that we're also going to be looking at in the Senate, and I'm not sure how far we'll get with it, but I'm very excited about it, is looking at the issue of ending qualified immunity here in Vermont and really trying to make sure that everyone has their day in court. So I think I'll leave it at that, Anne, because I do want to make sure people have a chance to ask their questions. But it's just a tremendous honor to have the job that I have here in the Senate. I work with a lot of very, very dedicated people, and I am really eager, along with the speaker, to do a lot of great work on behalf of Vermonters. So thank you for the invitation.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator Balint. And between the two of you, it's clear that we have really passionate leaders who are digging deep and making sure that folks aren't left behind. We heard, just such a whirlwind tour of the issues. It was, from Jill, and then Becca, you kind of shared with us some of the process and how you learn about, the tour, which I understand was really an amazing experience. And I'd even forgotten that, of course, it was virtual. How,
Yes.
incredible to make
And
that
that's-
happen.
And that's
Yeah.
it. And I mean, if I can jump in here, that's it. It was virtual. And yet I think, Jill will agree with me. We had really intimate conversations across the state because Jill would be in one room with a group of people. I would be in another room. They had direct access to us. We had help from some senators and House members who helped us facilitate. And they were conversations that really were so genuine. And I felt like I understood my state so much better from those conversations.
Yeah. Jill, do you want to say a few words about how this was for you, this experience?
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to say that there are people here in this room with us, in this virtual room, who did come to the tour. So thank you for those of you who participated. It was great to have you there. During this time, during the pandemic, I think more than ever, it's important for us to be as proactive as we can, to be out, even if it's just meeting people online, to show them that we're here, we care, and we want to do everything we can to help them through this. And it was really great to be able to spend so much time in these small groups, hearing about what's working, what's not working. And we heard this theme about people really feeling like that their neighbors had their back and that people were showing up in new and different ways to help one another. And that was so wonderful, just to hear the stories of how that's been playing out in communities. And then we heard some really hard stories and hard feedback about what's not working. And it was really helpful to have that direct conversation with people. We did it by county, and then we did some intentional stakeholder meetings. And so we really got to the opportunity to drill down and really hear, well, if that's not working, why not? And to hear specific stories about a program that's not working because of a certain threshold that's there, or it was just so helpful. And we learned a lot. I learned a lot, and we're taking those stories back with us into the virtual state house, into the building, and folding that into our work.
Yeah, I can't imagine that that's anything but incredibly helpful. And I expect that even as you deal with these issues, some of these faces will come back to you in some of these conversations. I'm sure will reverberate.
Yeah, and can I just say one other
Yes.
thing? Because I think one of the things that has been so interesting for us too is, so we talked to 1,400 Vermonters. We had our consultant help us to code the information and figure out what themes rose to the top, what were the, those issues we really needed to focus on. And then our chiefs of staff sat down with other stakeholders who were part of those meetings and said, hey, this is what we see that is rising to the top. These are the themes that we see emerging. And some of the folks who were people who were in marginalized groups felt like, hey, wait a minute, we don't feel like our voices are part of this, sort of broad stroke, these themes that have emerged. Yes, those may be true, but for us, from where we sit, these other things are more important. And so that is a piece that I think often we don't get a chance to do, is to go back and refine. And I know that process we've learned so much about engagement from that.
And about bringing all voices in.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's excellent. That's great. So I'm going to move on. We have a question here. With abortion rights under attack federally, what is the legislature doing to ensure that reproductive freedoms are protected here in Vermont? And I know, Speaker Krowinski, you touched on this some. Which one of you would like to kind of dive a little deeper?
I will hand it off to Jill because they're going to be dealing with it in the next few weeks. So I would hand it off.
Absolutely. Well, I will say that this goes back for us. I will never forget knocking on doors, talking to voters, and knocking on a door during the Kavanaugh hearing. And this woman was just beside herself, crying, so upset, thinking this is it. This is it for my reproductive rights. And it was such meaningful timing for me and the person I was with to be at that door and to have the conversation to say that we won't let that happen here. This is a very disturbing and challenging time in our history, and we can't go back. We cannot go back. And I worked at Planned Parenthood for nearly 8 years. And when I started there, we were having debates over, how wide clinic walls should be, or what types of birth control can be allowed to be over the counter or not. And to be now, years later, fighting over the core access of being able to make your own decisions about your health care. I just can't believe that we've slid back so far when it comes to this. And so we took action. We said, this is a problem. We can't wait, because the option is we could just assume that things would be fine in Vermont and tackle it if something came up. But at this point, we knew we could not do that. And so we came together and we worked out a short-term plan and a long-term plan to protect access in Vermont. So last biennium, we passed a House Bill 57. This was led by Representative Ann Pugh and Maxine Grad. And this was something to put short-term protections in law to ensure that it wouldn't be stripped away. And then the long-term plan was to start the constitutional amendment to get those core key words in our Constitution so that no matter what happened in Washington, no matter what happened in the Supreme Court, that all Vermonters would have reproductive freedom no matter what. And so I think we're going to be taking votes at the end of January, early February on this proposition. It will pass and it will go to the voters in November. And I will say that's not the end of the journey, right? Like, getting through this vote in the House will be hard work, and we're going to do it, and we're going to pass it. But we can't just assume that it's going to be fine and that people will show up and vote for it in November. So I think it is a key part of our party platform. It's something that we have led on, and we're going to need to work together to make sure that passes in November.
I have to say that it's something that it's just so interesting to me that when you started this, we didn't know what was going to happen in these states. And it's just been incredible. I think some people said, well, gee, why do we need this? What's the problem? Everything's fine. But I don't think anyone can say that now when we watch what's happening to reproductive freedoms at both a federal and state level. And it's just makes me feel so great that you are putting this time and energy into this really vital issue. So thank you.
And if I could, Ann, I just want to give Ann Pugh's been amazing in the House. And I just want to give a shout out to Senator Ginny Lyons, who was, really instrumental in bringing the reproductive liberty amendment forward. And I was remembering how Jill and I were meeting about these pieces of legislation and this amendment long before it ever came into the State House for us to do the actual work. So it is, it's really exciting that we're at this point right now. House will pass it will go to the voters, and then we're going to need all of your help to make sure it passes on the ballot. That's where Democrats up and down the state are going to be critical in helping us get this truly over the finish line.
I think you're really talking to every one of us on this call right now.
Yes. Yes, I am.
Thank you. All right. Next issue. Everyone in Vermont knows we have a major housing crisis. What have you done in the Senate and the House to address this, and what more can be done this session? And why don't we have you start, Senator Balint, since Jill started with the other one.
I'm happy to. And so, I will say that I have served on the Economic Development and Housing Committee for my entire time in the Senate. So this will be my 8th year. And we were in Governor Scott's first term, we were able to get, which was up until that point, the largest investment in housing that we had passed in Vermont in decades. And working with VHCB, we were able to bring hundreds of units online. And what we didn't fully anticipate was that one result of the pandemic and the flood of, for lack of a better term, COVID refugees who have come up from New York and Boston, New Jersey, and we love them. We're glad they're here. We need people here in Vermont, but it has made an already tight housing market incredibly tight. I know in my county, Windham County, there really is nothing available if you're looking for a rental. I know that's true in Chittenden County and many other parts of the state. So we have been investing dollars for years, but we know we need to make a sizable investment with these American Rescue Plan dollars. So hundreds of millions of dollars going into bringing more units online. Some of that will be around bringing more rental units online, but we really want to also have avenues for more houses for first-time home buyers that they can afford. We need more housing for supported housing for seniors, supported housing for people with either cognitive, mental, or physical disabilities. It's going to take moving many levers at once to try to address this problem. And I'm going to just let everybody know it was incredibly frustrating for the speaker and me when we passed S79, which was a bill looking specifically at rental safety and making sure people are not living in substandard housing. Like, this is not a radical idea. That's what you can tell, Ann, I'm going to get all worked up about it. This is not a radical idea to pass a bill that says people should not live in substandard housing. And so we got it through. And again, I mean, we've tried to do this for years, and then without any communication with us that there was any problems with the bill, the governor did veto it, which was incredibly frustrating. So I was just meeting with the chair of our committee, of our housing committee, this morning about this. And we probably will not use that same bill, S79, but we're going to take most of the parts of it and put it into another omnibus housing bill. We're not going to let this issue go, because even people who are in units right now, many Vermonters are paying too much for substandard housing. We need a system to protect people. So it is going to be investments that will happen over the next 3 years. The other piece I want to say is there is a part of the bill that he vetoed, which was a program he wanted, which was called the VHIP program, which was also rehabbing buildings that had been taken offline by landlords, and with some investments and grants, be able to bring those units back online. But we have a lot of work to do on this issue. And the other piece that I think a lot of people don't realize is we can also make a big dent by bringing more accessory dwelling units online. So if you're someone who has a garage that you feel like could be converted into housing, or you have a third floor that you feel like could be converted into housing, there may be opportunities for you to get money from the state to do that. We are really looking at any possible opportunity to get more housing. Jill, anything you want to add to that?
Becca, I think you did a really great job talking about all the different ways that we're going to be tackling housing this year. It is incredibly frustrating to have the governor veto the bill, and we wouldn't do a veto override just because literally there are dates that are old and we can't amend a bill that's been vetoed. But I think this is our next shot at really going into this session and even going bigger when it comes to housing. And so, another part of that bill that I thought was really important was establishing a loan fund that would provide no interest loans for home ownership, targeted especially for BIPOC Vermonters. There's so many aspects of this that touches our communities in so many different ways. I'll say that even, Becca mentioned the press conference that we did with Senator Sanders around increasing our nursing workforce. But one of the biggest challenges for the nursing workforce is they can't find a house. They can't find affordable housing, right? So, again, this is something that we're gonna lead on again and ensure that we can make really strong and solid investments in. So there was $190 million in our last budget, which is more than what the governor mentioned in his budget address and his State of the State address. And we set aside for us to look at this year, $250 million for housing initiatives. So I think that, that shows our commitment to ensuring that we can really make progress when it comes to affordable housing in Vermont.
Clearly, this is something that you both care deeply about, and just the picture that you painted makes it so stark and so important that we pass this legislation. Yeah, thank you. We have a question from Melinda Moulton, who some of us know very well, who I'm sure you do. She writes, "Great to see you, Becca and Jill. What is the plan for the women's prison? And are there necessary reforms planned that could create a women's campus for restorative and rehabilitative services for nonviolent incarcerated women, providing healthcare, education, life skills, keeping women with their children, and business ventures to teach entrepreneurship and provide value to their lives?" Who would like to?
Jill, will you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy. We can go back and forth here. First of all, Melinda, thank you for being here, and thank you for all your work advancing issues for women and reproductive rights. She was on the board when I worked at Planned Parenthood, and just really appreciate your advocacy. You are just amazing. So thank you. Thank you. So this is the topic of the women's prison. This is something that our House Corrections and Institutions Committee is reviewing, and it's super important that we make changes to better support women who are in the custody of the Department of Corrections. And one example I thought was really interesting, and I'm so glad that we have such committed legislators on doing this work. A small group of legislators went to Maine to look at the facility there that allows women to work in the local community and develop the work skills and community connections that are just so important. So we were looking at other models and what's been working, and I think we learned a lot that was brought back that we'll be talking about in committee. This is also closely tied to our work in Justice Reinvestment 2.0, which is work that's been taken on with the Council of State Governments Justice Center. I can never say that smoothly. And the goal of that work is to examine the best way to make investments in upstream services to support individuals and community-based services for people upon their release, so that they have the opportunity to be well prepared and have the tools to start a new chapter. This work also has a heavy focus on racial equity in sentencing. The committees are just beginning the work to review these recommendations, and I encourage you to watch that testimony, to send questions, to be engaged, and I really look forward to seeing what they come up with.
This is such an important issue, and as you talk about it, there's so many aspects to it. As you said, the racial equity issue, the idea of women being able to work in the community, reaching out to other providers. Yeah, this is really important. Thank you. We have a question from another Vermont leader who many folks know of, and that's Rebecca Holcomb. Here is a question I have that relates to what feels like a bedrock democratic issue. Currently, the policy in some parts of Vermont is to defund and undermine democratically governed public schools by sending our shared tax dollars to private schools that compare people who are LGBTQ to people who practice incest and bestiality, to schools that exclude people who won't sign a religious pledge, to private schools that exclude kids who are not easy and cheap to educate, to schools that exclude kids with difficult parents, and to specialized private schools that refuse to account for how they spend the millions of tax dollars they receive. This raises costs for every taxpayer and breaks down our sense of unity. What are you going to do about this problem this session?
So I really appreciate the question. It is something I've actually been talking with, and I'm sure the speaker has too, with her chair of education. And we are going to be having hearings soon, and Speaker, you'll have to remind me whether it's starting in the Senate or in the House. I think it's starting in the Senate, but
It's starting in the Senate. Yep.
yes, thank you. Looking at this issue of separation of church and state. And so, Anne, if I could just give also just a little background that people may not know. So Maine and Vermont right now are really the two states, I believe, at this point, who allow public dollars to go to private institutions. So in Vermont, if you live in a town that doesn't have a high school affiliated, you could, take it to a private school. And Maine essentially said, well, we don't want those dollars to be going to religious schools. And we have a similar situation here in Vermont. And it was the U.S. Supreme Court heard the case shortly before Christmas. I think it was around December 21st or so. And the expectation is, given the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court that we have right now, the expectation is they're going to say, actually, you do have to let those public dollars go to religious schools if you are allowing other parents to take those schools to other private schools. Wow. So this is concerning for us. Senator Campion, who chairs our committee, has been working for many, many months to try to find a way for us to deal with this situation here in Vermont. And it is, I will just speak candidly, it's always been very uncomfortable for me as a teacher and as a parent when I moved to Vermont to see that we were spending public dollars to private institutions. The problem that we have right now is that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we have been asked by schools essentially not to make any changes right now in the midst of the pandemic. We've been asked by families in the midst of the pandemic. We don't know if our kids are going to be in school. We don't know if they're going to be remote. It feels like right now the timing is not great for us to be having this conversation in the midst of a time when schools, public and private, are in crisis. But I can guarantee you that especially when we get the ruling from the Supreme Court, we are going to have to decide as a state what we're going to do about this issue, because as Rebecca said in her question, there are schools currently in Vermont that are discriminating against, queer kids because they're religious schools taking, public dollars. So it is something very near and dear to my heart to tackle this issue. The speaker, I know we've talked about it. She feels the same way. We're just trying to figure out what it is that we can do this session. But I can promise you, this is going to be something we'll be talking about the next couple sessions, given the Supreme Court case that's coming. Jill, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh, I think you did a great job, Becca. I mean, Rebecca and I have been talking about this for months now, and I share the concern, and I am very concerned. And in talking with Becca about what are the priorities and topics that we really need to plan out and talk about, this is one that we did spend time on because it is so important, and we need to figure out how we can solve this problem in the short term and long term, given the dynamics and the challenges that we have right now. So thank you for that question.
To me, this is an example of a question that it tells why this is so important to have you here, because this is a question that has layers that most of us don't really see when we first, hear about it. And it's been very helpful for me to hear that perspective. So thank you. We have a question from, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong, perhaps. I apologize up front. Gordon Korstang. Pension fund, pension fund, pension fund. Retired teachers are now being told that the Blue 65 plan offered by the state was not legal or correct or something. What is going on behind the scenes?
So, Gordon, I think we're going to need to get more, unless Becca knows, but some more information from you about that and circle back, because I have not heard that specific complaint come up about being legal or correct. So I really can't speak to that question. I can say in general that we are working so hard with the unions to find a path forward on how we can make sure that our hardworking state employees and our teachers have a pension when they retire. We have a $5.6 billion unfunded pension liability. We've been working over the summer and fall. There's been a pension task force where people have been working really closely together to find a path. And I know that, we need to make sure that they are taken care of when they retire. And legislators have been working for decades to try to figure out this solution. And I think that we have a real opportunity here, given the one-time money that we set aside to help find a solution with $150 million to take this moment in time to make progress. And so I feel optimistic. We're working really hard to ensure with our union partners that we can find a way forward.
So the other thing that I would add, Anne, is that we know that there were real mistakes made several decades ago about underfunding. And so we have been working really, really hard the last few weeks to find additional money to invest to backfill that hole. And the speaker and I have gone numerous times to the unions, given the stress that schools are under right now, given the stress that our public employees are under because of the pandemic. And we've said, if now is not the time for all of us to be able to find a path forward, we can revisit it. And every single meeting we've had, they've said, no, we want to come together. We want to figure this out now. We don't know when we'll have this kind of money again. So, I certainly don't want to jinx anything, but I do feel like we're in a much more positive position than we were even a few months ago. I feel like these conversations that we've had with this core group of teachers and public employees has really helped us get closer to a solution that's going to work for all the people around the table.
Yeah, this is one of these very tough issues that, it takes a lot from everybody. Robert Esser, can you assess whether H276 incremental advance toward publicly funded healthcare can advance this session and be on the priority list?
So I'm going to
take that.
Jill, I didn't know if you wanted to take that one, or you want me to?
I can start that one. Trying to be respectful of the back and forth here.
Yeah, it's an H bill, so I thought
it's an H bill. That's fair.
Yeah.
So I'll start with this. We've been meeting with healthcare providers in every sector, talking about this pandemic and what they need right now, and very similar to what people are talking about in our public schools about, please, we really need to stabilize the system, and we can't handle any more changes right now. It is dire. When I talk to nurses right now and the number of hours that they are working, that they have been working this entire time during the pandemic, they're done. And we are seeing retirements, early retirements, or nurses leaving the field and becoming travel nurses. There is a serious concern about the way the pandemic has harmed and just really drawn down the resources of all of our healthcare providers. So we just really need to address and be proactive in addressing the current situation the healthcare system is in. And we have to be responsive to their needs right now in this moment. And that's needs from access to workforce development, to quality of life for them, affordability. These are all the things we need to consider, and finding the right path after discussions through our committee process to give us the best solutions moving forward. I don't think it would be fair for me to just say, we're going to take this route in handling this very complex, challenging question, we really need to bring in people, all stakeholders around the table, to find out how can we best support them during this critical time, during this crisis. So that is where we are going to take our start in the House. We also need to address what's happening with COVID. Just in general, what are we doing to help increase contact tracing, or what are we doing to get more tests out there? Our system is really struggling right now. And so I think it's our job to make sure that we can come in and help them bridge through and get through this crisis. Do you have anything you want to add, Becca?
Well, the only thing I would add is on the macro, like, we need Medicare for all. We need Medicare for all. We need to decouple people's insurance from their work. We have seen this in the pandemic, writ large. This is a societal problem, and it's clear to me we need a federal solution. And so it is, as we know, it is not an easy lift on the federal level, but given the demographic challenges in Vermont and the size of our pool, it's really clear to me it has to be a federal solution.
Thank you. Those are, both very, very well said, both of you. It is 5 to 6, but if you'll stick with us a little longer, we want to see if we have some questions that have come into the chat box, and we so appreciate you doing this. Asha, do you have questions?
Yes, I'm seeing some from the chat box, and I want to thank everybody who's been sharing some really great questions there. I think we'll get to as many as we can, as Anne said, but I'm happy to read one out here. Actually read two out that are on a similar topic, and that is healthcare. Ellen Oxfeld said, I see that the materials we have received from the Vermont Democratic Party always say something like healthcare for all, which is a great sentiment. But what are we doing to make sure that will actually become a reality in Vermont? The last official survey showed that 40% of Vermonters were underinsured or insured, and we're still in a pandemic. So shouldn't we try to get on the road to healthcare for all by creating a truly universal publicly financed system? This was called for in Act 48, Ellen says. She goes on to say that Vermonters are not getting the care they need due to out-of-pocket costs and our fragmented system of financing based on public insurance. Anne Reynolds said some similar sentiments here about universal health care. Anne is wondering why we aren't, for example, following some of states like Maine or Minnesota who are working toward universal health care. And I would add, I think that both Anne and Ellen would love to hear about how we might be doing just that.
Well, I think we really talked about that in the last question that came up around universal primary care. I mean, our healthcare system is in crisis. And I think right now we have to respond to what we're hearing from healthcare providers and from Vermonters across the state about what our urgent needs are. We have a wait list for people to access mental health care providers. That's months and months and months. And so what I think is just really important is that we step back and we really understand what is it that people need right now, because we are in crisis. And so if that means it's continuing to expand telemedicine so that people can gain more access to providers and be able to do it from home and not have to worry about traveling, because they're juggling their work schedule and their children and they can't take time off, that we're finding those opportunities like that we're addressing the nursing shortage. We talked about being with Senator Sanders. We're working on a plan to ensure that we can get more nurses into school so that the healthcare costs that we are paying for traveling nurses isn't as huge as it is right now. I think it would be great if there was like Becca said, a national plan to do this. We've looked at different states, and I'm not sure exactly where they all are in this process, but I know that people are all challenged because of this pandemic. And so I'm looking forward to our committees doing the good work of taking testimony and learning what are the concrete steps we can take to increase access and make healthcare more affordable in this moment right now.
All right, I've got one for either of you. It's from Helene Martin. What are the legislators going to do about Danone Corporation's elimination of purchasing organic milk from our farmers?
I'm assuming maybe Horizon is a subsidiary of that. I'm not familiar with that company in particular, so I don't want to misspeak. I do know that that will certainly be something that will come up within our agricultural committees. It's very concerning for all of us that have organic farms in our districts. I don't have any specific, I don't have any specifics on that. I apologize. I don't know. Jill?
Yeah, no, I think that we have a task force that's been working on this, and they're working with regional and federal partners to find avenues to help support these farms. So I know that work is being done on that. And we also have our legislative dairy task force as well that has worked throughout the summer to look at our dairy industry and how we can help move it and support it into the 21st century. So 2 different task forces working on this broader issue, and I'm sure this is part of their work.
Okay, well then I'm going to keep my thank you very quick, but I just want to say the amount of issues that you two juggle, and I also want to say, you know, thanks to all the other representatives and senators on this call too. It's daunting, and it affects so many lives. And I just want to say, you know, how much we appreciate from all of us who are listening, all that you do and all that you bring, and the skill and wisdom and amount of knowledge and also empathy and caring. You both shared stories that are really moving. And I can see that these aren't just like 2-dimensional issues to you. You really live them and feel them. And it's just been a wonderful experience to hear your responses. And it makes me even more excited to be in this role where I hope to help you as well as I can. And I just want to leave by saying we do need help. We're entering a very exciting and busy campaign season. And I hope that folks will consider both volunteering, maybe even running, helping with campaigns, and also donating to the House campaign, the Senate the campaign. And you can also, I invite you to visit vtdemocrats.org, where you'll learn about donation options and volunteering. So thank you all very, very much. This was an incredible opportunity, and I really appreciate it. And that you did this after such a long day is a real testament to both of you.
Well,
So
and can we also, we want to thank all the legislators on the call with us as well. They've also been on Zoom all day legislating, and we are a citizen legislature, and many of them have other jobs as well. So I just want to really thank them.
I totally agree. Thank you so much. All right, we will be seeing you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for all your great work. We really appreciate you.
Stay safe, please.